Welcome, everyone, to What the Force, and welcome to the finale deep dive of Andor Declassified. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, and with me, as always, for these episodes, is my good friend and yours, Alex Kane.
Thanks for having me. It's been a really fun season.
I want to thank you very much for joining me all this year on all of the fun Star Wars stuff we've been talking about. It's been really great as we kind of wrap up this current year.
Yeah, the 1-2 punch of Obi-Wan and Andor has been a hell of a time, and it's been nice hearing like some of the feedback and things like that. We're very appreciative of that.
As we get into this, I have some kind of thoughts before we get into the episode Ferrix Road and kind of completing another run of a show. I know that we have an entire, second part, right? Second season to this show, and we are where we are right now. But every time it feels like Star Wars finishes its, run, its trilogy, its movie, its series, its season, it's like a Star Wars blanket has been completed. Whether that blanket is crocheted by a 12-year-old or finely needle pointed together where you can, or woven together in like an expert fashion, depends on kind of how warm and beautiful the blanket is, really. We've had a wide variety of different types of Star Wars blankets in the Disney era, and this is one of the best.
Yeah, easily the best Star Wars thing for at least the last 5 years.
Yeah,
possibly since 1983, but yeah.
Since The Last Jedi for myself, I really love The Last Jedi. But absolutely stands tall with kind of the best that Star Wars can get. And it does it all without Force users or lightsabers, which is incredibly hard for Star Wars because that's the brand that they've built so much of their marketing around. They threw in Darth Vader and that whole Darth Vader-ness into Rogue One. Yeah. And, it might have been purposeful how much of him was in there and how much they used and stuff like that to start with, or how much they increased, really to remind people this is still Star Wars. But they were brave enough with this show to not do that.
Yeah.
Which is hard.
And also, a lot of the conversations around like Rey's character on all kinds of fronts, landed on the idea that people really love the idea that people can kind of be who they want to be, and like anyone can be a hero, and like Andor leans all the way into that. This is not a show about dynasties or bloodlines. It's someone with adoptive parents rising up and sort of becoming who they were meant to be. And it's a good example of that kind of found family that people sort of love to find value in Star Wars. So
yeah.
And community too.
Community, and it's done in such a way that it feels earned, right? I know people like to use that terminology, but it has to do with not just throwing people together that have no chemistry, actually having the actors have us believe it, I think.
Yeah.
I want this to be the level of Star Wars writing in the future. This, and, production was great, but this level of writing and this level of, trusting the audience, even if we reintroduce Force users into it, is what I hope that we get going forward.
Sure. Yeah. And it's just so dynamic. Like you get like really quiet moments that it's not all, running to the next adventure and like pew pew like the whole time. It's, it's like human beings living lives. And the show feels downright radical in a number of ways, from a storytelling perspective and the character, but also the content. It's just kind of all around a nice evolution in the way that a lot of people felt The Last Jedi was kind of an evolution in a bright direction.
Yeah.
This continued that baton a little bit.
I don't want it to cast shade on some of the Star Wars that has been less of a solid blanket, right? If we're back to my blanket metaphor, I don't know. I'm running with it. I'm very tired today.
Blankets are nice.
But to me, Star Wars is always like a warm hug. It feels good, and it feels like something that you've always wanted, right?
Yeah.
And that's a blanket to me. And I really don't want to say like some Star Wars is it's still a blanket, but it's less well constructed, right? It has less detail. It has less continuous pattern that makes you see something deeper within the blanket, and
sure,
this absolutely does this. It pulls on threads from far, far early on in the season. It repeats thematically concepts that we've seen before. It grows on itself. And so it doesn't have to do as much heavy lifting in the end episode to bring us where we are, because we've been there all along.
Yeah. It does a really sort of deft job of like pulling everything together at the end without feeling like it's racing the runtime, it all just feels very natural, and like all these characters colliding in an organic way, around the funeral. So
like, you think about it, and the three characters, like the three main characters that we've been following, except for the ISB people, Mon Mothma and Perrin and Lita, are the only ones missing from Ferrix.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And it makes sense. Like they have sort of the loosest connection to, this sort of Andor side of things. Yeah. But we still get that little bookend to kind of catapult us into season 2. But for the most part, it feels like book 1 of 2. It feels like a, nice, neat, close the book. And then we get the second one in a couple years.
Yeah. And
I was satisfied.
I'm willing to wait for good Star Wars, always.
Yes. Yeah. If it's anything like this, take your time.
Yeah, take your time, make it right. Did you want to dig into the episode, or do you have any further thoughts before we get started?
Yeah, I think we can jump in.
Of course, this was episode 12 called Rick's Road, which I don't know why, but it took me until this episode to realize it's Ferrix main road. Rick's Road.
Yeah, there must be something really significant about Rick's, because like I was thinking like fair as in like beautiful, maybe like beautiful Rick's. I don't know.
It's RIX, so it's like to me it's like Ferris, like iron, right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Like workers. Ferris
solidarity. Yeah,
is like working with iron. You're working, like a Ferris is a person who makes horseshoes, right? Anvil, hammer. That's the whole theme of the town and the planet, right? They bash stuff up and they make things that are useful.
Nice. Yeah, there was that old, there's like an old derelict factory from like the first or second episode or third episode. I can't remember. But yeah, it's like that old kind of, Victorian era factory sort of thing.
Yeah, it was when Lucian and
when they were meeting about the device.
This was again directed by Benjamin Caron, who has a lot of episodes all over the place of BBC television. Especially The Crown, I believe. But also he's done like Sherlock and stuff like that. And of course, written by Tony Gilroy. And these two, he did, of course, do episode 7, 11, and 12. So again, these all kind of feel interconnected in a kind of, conceptual way. This just feels like the continuation of 11, which it absolutely is. It's like a giant movie.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed listening with my noise canceling headphones on today, when the title starts, you hear the main theme that you've heard every single other episode, but the band that plays later on in the episode is playing the theme.
Amazing.
And throughout the episode, there's been a distinct lack of horns in the orchestra, and we finally get them this episode. Like the missing piece musically has suddenly appeared.
Yeah.
It's really
Absolutely.
cool. I hope I get to deep dive into the music with somebody much smarter than me on this.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out like, okay, what's the melody that the marching band is sort of playing around with? Because, the marching band in The Phantom Menace is sort of playing like the major key version of the Palpatine theme. So I was like, there's some kind of code to crack here, but I'm not quite musical enough to get there yet.
I'll definitely ask Frank to give me his thoughts, but yeah. And,
Heck yeah.
It's great. So we start out and we get the young man who his father had been killed by the ISB agents soldering something together. And over the course of kind of cutting in and out of a bunch of scenes, we see him prepping. And I recognized it immediately as some sort of bomb.
Yep.
And while he's looking at the picture of his dad, we kind of see it, and it zooms out from his hands working on it to the larger picture. And, I'm just absolutely struck by this being a parallel to like the concept of a powder keg, right? We're priming the powder keg. Everybody knows all of the different ways this could possibly go wrong. This is not uncommon for situations where community leaders die, and then there's a riot or something charged happens because emotions are already running high. And, I just felt like it was a really apt symbol for the episode to start with.
Yeah, I was really struck by this character in this, again, really radical notion here, in Star Wars. And some of my notes, I'm like, this is going to get me put on some kind of a list or something. But I love so much that like governments have done a really good job of branding bombs as instruments of terrorism and evil the last few decades. But like militaries use bombs and police forces use bombs. So it's like this convenient narrative that, oppressors use bombs for good and civilians use bombs for evil. And here you have, somebody who has sort of like a righteous cause and,
or at least a vengeful one.
A vengeful one. Yeah, it was a bold choice of the writers and Gilroy to be like,
this is where things are at. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought of like Operation Valkyrie, where like, they tried to blow up Hitler and, stuff like that. And it's just kind of like
reminds me of the Troubles too, right? That period of time in Ireland where, there really wasn't a lot of choices with dealing with occupation of Ireland before things ended up becoming separated, etc. Reminds me a lot of that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff about like Irish history in relation to this series on social media, but I need to read a book about it or something. I don't know enough about my Irish ancestry to really draw anything too meaningful, but it's I really like how much sort of history is in this episode. And again, the bomb thing is a good metaphor. It kind of feels like that V for Vendetta sort of thing.
Your government should be afraid of its people.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have Deirdre arriving, and she's surrounded by death troopers as an escort. And I'm really struck, and I want to call back the symbol that troopers, both death and stormtroopers, evoke is skeletons. And like death troopers specifically are even scarier because they don't even like use English. They use like this weird code concept. Like they're like ghouls almost, right? And there's a storm while she's arriving and arrives immediately to the hotel. The hotel, and I don't know why I didn't notice this before, is round.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And deep inside, so circles themselves, from a Jungian psychology perspective, and Joseph Campbell talks about it himself a lot, are representations of the self, the whole self, right? And you have the upper levels that are the conscious self and the lower levels that are the unconscious and the things that we have to sort of understand through dream language and don't directly talk to our conscious self. And somewhere in the middle, as we try to sort out these things, we're taking directions from our ego or what we assume is us, right? But we're actually this whole unit. And the hotel being directly in the middle of town, being kind of at the heart of everything, is really deeply symbolic. And that the one major piece of Cassian that he has left behind, that represents such a large part of him, his history, and in a lot of ways, the representation of his anima or his feminine self, is Bix, broken in the middle of this Jungian self-representation. Wild.
Yeah. When you said circle, I pictured that like in graphic design and like book covers and stuff. A lot of times if somebody uses like a maze, it's a circular maze with like the goal in the center of the maze. So that's interesting, I guess. So those
sort of labyrinth looks or mazes that are typically used in book covers like that are representations of self in a different way. And they're used often to trace around for meditation.
Okay.
And it's a walking around one of those that's on the floor is often used as meditation because you go deeper into the different aspects of yourself by clearing your mind and doing something that is unlike that, right? You're more able to listen to the unconscious part of you. And, you know, it's really interesting. She goes in there and she's like, I own this self. You know, I'm just going to take a walk around the city. Like, nobody's going to notice. Like, literally, like, she's just so overconfident. It's wild. But, you know, we kind of get a feel for the city in that people do notice her. We see Brasso and the guy who had the conversation with Cassian to let him know that his mom had passed, talking about that and kind of laying the groundwork. But everybody's kind of being cautious because, they know everything's on edge. Everything's building.
We sort of had talked about like wanting to know whether his sister was going to come back into the picture. And like, it's funny how Bix in this episode, like 2 or 3 different times, she kind of like psychologically stands in for the sister that he sort of lost, and like at first she says something like, I knew he'd come back, or I know you knew you'd come back for me, or whatever. And like, I envisioned you climbing over a wall and all this stuff. And it's like, it both foreshadows Rogue One and also calls back to the stuff with his sister. So I thought that was cool that they did make a point to address that initial drive in him.
And why that's important psychologically is because he hasn't come to terms with that missing feminine aspect of himself, the aspect that loves and allows himself to love, and a lot of that is resolved this episode, or at least he's given the tools to resolve it this episode.
Yeah
that instinct is right on, Alex.
Oh, thank you.
Cinta's following the ISB guy around, like obviously very well aware of who he is, what he's doing.
He's not very sly.
Yeah. We get our betrayer, who's literally given the nickname Big Mouth throughout. He has a different name. I wrote it down. Let me look for it. But like the ISB and the people, the Empire on the planet actually call him Big Mouth, which is like he's betraying everybody around him, and like they don't even care to actually call him by a name, which is so funny. But he's actually in the bar with the comms guy who is speaking with Brasso, and he's using like this, it's like wild reverse psychology to find out what's going on. Like losing your mother.
Oh, right.
Like Brasso placing the stone. Oh, if you know something, do not tell me. I don't want to know.
I don't want to know. And then, but then he orders another round for him. Yeah.
And then he orders another round for him, and he still finds out that he's involved. And, he knows what he knows is true, that like Cassian knows, and he's probably coming back, which is just, it's such a subtle way to show how real people get information and manipulate situations. Rather than, oh, he just spilled his guts right in front of me. No, he asked him not to tell him, so he could never use that against him.
Yeah. We talked about Luthen being very Palpatine-like in some of the early episodes where he sort of dressed up and he looked sort of like the good, like, nobleman Senator Palpatine. And then in this episode, we get, sort of the Black Hood version of Palpatine from Luthen. Like at crucial moments where, like, in the speech, they're talking about like gathering darkness or whatever and all this stuff. And there's a lot of subtext about how Luthen is that character sort of manipulating things from the shadows and puppeteering people, like you just said. And
I wanted to call out Tim from my Discord, the What the Force Discord, actually called out some visual parallels really heavily to the Phantom Menace and to Darth Maul. So riding on the cycle, the hood up, chasing after people in the desert. His craft itself looks very sleek in design, very much like Darth Maul's. Like, there's a lot of like sort of dark side, agent of the dark side symmetry with that. And he wondered if there was a bit of how Maul is like the Sisyphus of Star Wars, right? He keeps on trying to win things his way, but never learns. Right? There's a bit of that Sisyphus. I also think that there is, like what we said in earlier episodes, there's a lot of the symbolic perspective that he is on the dark side of the rebellion, right? He just got Krieger killed to save other chunks of the rebellion. He also could be stuck on a path of selfishness, right? Protecting himself over protecting others. And that's a key metaphor in Star Wars, right? Selflessness is compassion, love for others, community, coming together as one of many, versus control, selfishness, hurting others, right? And my good friend Matt actually reminded me of an event where George Lucas was trying to explain Star Wars to teenagers. It's like at this like community event or something. It's just him hanging out with a bunch of teenagers explaining life. And he's like, are you helping people or are you hurting people? Because if you're hurting people, there's no way you can help them. And it's just as simple as that. And so Luthen visually needs to be dark. And these visual codes of what a dark person looks like a dark side person or a person on a not helpful path to others, it is the Sith, is Darth Maul, is Palpatine, is all of these kind of clothing. And he kind of has been going through them in all of these episodes.
Yeah. I put in my notes that like Palpatine, he wants to sort of use and control and like almost possess like Anakin and then Luke and then Rey. And, here Luthen is kind of doing that with Cassian where, if I can have him, he'll be my instrument and I'll allow him to live. And the cause is ultimately good, but the methodology is like, if I can't have him, I'm going to kill him. But if, or he can be my blade or whatever. And
he's absolutely willing to bring others down with him. Like Cinta was going to be the person who would probably try to go after him originally. And Vel, right? I'm going to have these people, Vel and Cinta, who worked with Cassian and Cassian helped save them before, kill him to save myself.
Yeah.
Luthen. Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot for Star Wars.
Yeah. It's shades of gray there for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's not.
I mean, my hope is that Luthen's understanding of the galaxy shifts with Cassian's experience in bringing himself out of the darkness himself. I hope that this helps Luthen get out of the darkness, because sometimes prisons are not ones made of walls.
Sure. Yeah.
Sometimes they're of our own creation, which we hear from Luthen himself.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like he's half of the equation that sort of gets Cassian where he needs to be, him and Marva both maybe. And, I like that idea that the student teaches the master something in season 2, or sort of Luke with Rey and Last Jedi.
We only have really, I think, 2 Mon Mothma scenes in the episode, and the first one is her waiting in the car, and I was obsessed with her undoing her jacket and taking off like her adornments and just being so frustrated. But I love how tricksy she is, because this is absolutely a friggin' lie.
Yeah, this is like a big like Luthen moment, right, where she's putting on like a performance for the driver, right? She knows the driver is like an Imperial spy, basically.
Yeah. And so she's totally willing to pick a fight with Perrin about something like a shadow of the past that is realistic but not real.
Yeah.
To explain the money being gone so that the Empire thinks she's vulnerable enough.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, just like, like, oh, we're weak and we have this problem, and that's why the money is, not properly accounted for, but really like, she's so much more sort of dangerous.
Exactly. And, we can ignore her. She ends up kind of having this problem on her books. Like,
yeah.
She's controllable, right?
Right.
Yeah. I loved the Canto Bite reference.
Yeah.
It makes me want to go back there. I love Canto Bite so much. I know some people don't, but I love it. It's great.
It's like the most George thing in The Last Jedi, like sort of visually, and just it's so corny. I love it to death. It's so good.
The deleted scenes of the spa are like some of my, like the weird creatures.
Oh, the massage and
the
stuff.
Massage spa.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I love it.
You kind of almost feel bad for Perrin, because you're like, she's totally making this up. She's totally just running his name through the mud and making him think like, who's out for me? Why are they trying to drive a wedge between me and my loving wife?
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, who told you these things? Who told you?
They're just trying to hurt you through me. It's great. It's great stuff.
It's really good.
And of course, we get the follow-up, just ever so brief scene with the ISB later where it calls out, and we can talk about that then. But we have Cinta and Vel, and, the writing and the direction of this scene are so beautifully, visually symbolic.
Cinta with her back to Vel, like that stuff.
And to like the mission and the cause, and she's just like super hyper focused, and she's like, yeah, good to see you too.
Good to see you too.
Yeah,
so good.
Come away from the window. Be with me for a moment is basically what she's saying. What are we fighting for? But when Cinta actually does turn around, she's mostly in the dark, and Val, they use the lighting really well, is lit up. Wanting interconnection versus shutting yourself off. And this is where Star Wars is getting complex for people, right? Can you end up doing bad things with good reasons? Can you do good things with bad reasons? It's hard. This is hard stuff. And I'm very proud of Star Wars for tackling it. Thank you, Tony Gilroy, for being brilliant.
Yes. I mean, they both were sort of so neutrally cold on the Aldhani sort of a trio of episodes where the arc where, Vel was a little bit more like Cinta in those episodes. And then Cinta was not quite as dark. And then it's sort of like through all that stress and chaos and loss, I guess, we should say, and having to do some dirty work along the way, like people respond to things differently. And so Vel has sort of warmed up and found her humanity again. And Cinta is, like sort of treading dangerous ground with the stabby and all that stuff. So
yeah. Well, she's in deep, right? She's in deep without remembering what this is all about and your interconnections to others. And it's played in stark contrast, her and Luthen and Vel, and like them kind of being these like rogue players in this city that almost has this beautiful moment of organic rebellion happening. And it's just really powerful to show like there are all kinds involved in the rebellion, and also the darkness might take you to a place that you can't get back from.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's and you need those interconnections to keep you grounded, to keep you sane. You need to remember love in all of this. Cassian comes back to the city and goes and visits Clem's stone. And he touches the stone and he remembers a lesson was taught by him. And I'm really thankful to the first season of The Mandalorian that enabled this sort of thing to happen before flashbacks were a thing.
Yeah.
This is not something that we would see. And the show don't tell aspect of the flashback is such a good device that was needed in Star Wars, I think, for a while. It functioned well without it. But in sort of this long format storytelling, we absolutely need the flashback. What did you think of this?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. This is like the scene I remember the least because I was just sort of so distracted by like the performance of the father and just the emotion of it. So I don't remember what they were making or fixing or whatever. But
they were fixing some sort of component that sold new for 500 credits.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Like a part from a spaceship. That's right. Yeah.
And they had 50 or 60 of them in the back, or 70 or 80. Yeah, a large amount of them in the back. So like a lot of money. And So I wrote down what he told Cassian while he was showing him this. The man who sees everything is more blessed than cursed. 2 minutes, no shorter, no longer. They don't look down where they should. They don't look down past the rust. Not us, though. Eyes open, possibilities everywhere. Just need to clean it up before Marva finds us doing this in the house. Right? Okay.
Love that.
So I absolutely love this because it functions on a couple of layers, right? So the metaphor itself is, just because it's been used and abused doesn't mean it doesn't have value. It doesn't take much to turn it around. 2 minutes, no shorter, no longer, right? Like really the blink of an eye, you can turn something around from something that you thought was maybe waste, right?
Sure.
People don't often see the value in discarded things or people, right? And he's very much talking about, in some ways, the people of the galaxy, looking past the rust, looking past maybe the things that they've done bad or the things they've done wrong, or the fact that they're undervalued by the Empire to be just things that have to be thrown away, right? Used. But possibilities are everywhere for people who have their eyes open. This is a call forward to how we hear Marva talking about being awake.
Yeah.
Eyes being open is you are awake. Eyes being closed, right, is you are asleep.
Yeah.
And if you are awake, you can clean up the place.
Yeah.
This also ties into a massive concept of identity. So go ahead. I want to dig into that in a sec.
Sure. Yeah. So, God, I mean, there's so much going on here. Without leaping too far ahead, I felt that bit about basically seeing what other people don't see and sort of finding value and things like that, scavenging, like you kind of get a call back to the prison. Andor tells, I think, Loy, they don't have to watch us. They don't have to listen because they're sort of like fat and comfortable. Whereas like, somebody who lives with precarity is a word that I've heard used that I like, this idea that I sure hope my next paycheck comes and, and I don't wind up on the street and, will I be able to feed my family, blah, blah, blah. So like, someone who is like a high ranking officer in the empire or is like running a casino on Canto Bight, they're sort of blinded by comfort. I love that this show has such a class consciousness, and Star Wars has been accused of not having one. I don't think that's quite true. I think that it just it hasn't always been so overt or sort of carefully explored. I think Last Jedi did a pretty good job of opening that door, and here it's like I think the things he's saying, in one reading, in the way I sort of read that, is, the poor people, they have to be creative, people, the hustle. I find that very attractive from how do we beat the oppressors? Well, we're craft. We know how to survive. They're sort of comfortable, things like that. So.
Like what I wanted to call out about identity is there's a theory about gaze and the concept of that how you form your identity is based on how you see other people looking at you. Right. And there's something that happens where, especially in, when you're able to break out of social normative expectations, where you're able to apply a filter to that based on something more intrinsic inside of you, or how you're able to reorient the lens by which you take in that gaze. And I think it's really important to say that this statement about these machines or these parts being covered in rust and how other people see them versus how, effectively Clem and Cassian see things and see the value in themselves is the really important switch that needs to be flipped with the rebellion. And many times with ourselves, because being who we are and allowing ourselves to be whole people without being cut up and mutilated by the society that wants to dominate us is rebellious. Allowing ourselves to exist and be whole in our own skins, which is really incredibly hard to do. And we fight our whole lives to that. That is the heroic act that we all go on in living our lives.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to be whole, trying to be who we really are against the expectations of society.
Yeah.
It's hard. And that's fundamental in what Clem is teaching Cassian. Isn't that interesting?
I love that. That is good. I think of this is sort of getting into the weeds of non-Star Wars, but like, what that produces in practice is like people who really try to reinforce those sort of norms that you're talking about. Like they don't realize that they're sort of helping the empire in this metaphor. Whereas like, so you get a lot of people who are like, gatekeeping this or that identity or sort of like splintering off into a million different. And so I love Nemec's manifesto in this episode, which, we'll get to that. But, this idea that the left, quote unquote, or anybody, sort of left of center, it's hard to get things done because on the right side of the political spectrum, they're like, there's this immense gravity toward inertia and domination and patriarchy and, keeping the gays off TV and, all this stuff. Right. And so like just all this sort of guiding light bullshit and then on the left, it's like, well, let's nitpick every little thing to death. And then like Nemec's manifesto is sort of this idea that, if you're fighting oppression, you are moving the needle in a good direction. And so if we're all just sort of doing that.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think it's a great time to get into it.
Sure.
Of course, Cassian is listening to this in his hiding space that we saw at the start of the season, right? This is his self, right? This is his internal unconscious to show us that he is absorbing these words and they're becoming part of him. And, there will be times when the struggle seems impossible. I know this already. Alone, unsure, dwarfed by the scale of our enemies. So we see this and we actually flash to Bix, who's trapped, right, inside of the equivalent of the system, a place that was home for some, temporarily, a hotel, which has now been turned into a tool of imprisonment. Remember this. Freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously and without instruction. Random acts of insurrection are occurring constantly throughout the galaxy. There is whole armies, battalions that have no idea that they've already been enlisted to a cause. I love this so much. I underlined it because of many reasons. Remember that the frontier of the rebellion is everywhere, and even the smallest acts of insurrection pushes our lines forward. And remember this, the imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks, it leaks, authority is brittle. Oppression is the mask of fear. Remember that. And know this, the day will come when all of these skirmishes and battles, these moments of defiance, will have flooded the banks of the Empire's authority, and then there will be one too many. One single thing that breaks the siege. Remember this. Try. Oh, goody.
Pretty good.
Yeah. There's so much fundamental Star Wars in this speech, and yet it is delivered by a non-Force user.
Yeah.
Right? And, let's talk about the thing that I outlined, I underlined and I called it out when I was reading this. The whole armies and battalions who have no idea that they've already been enlisted to the cause. So this is that anyone can choose to be on the good side. Anyone can choose to care about others, right? It's that seed within us, right? Because it's the system that's broken. It's not people.
Right. Yeah. I saw this viral tweet going around that was about how this guy had sort of lived in service of all the things capitalism sort of begged of him, that sort of, hustle culture that's very dominant, the sort of LinkedIn, don't sleep, work out, work 10 jobs, that thing. And it was basically my friend had no life outside of work, and he died at 32 with, nothing to show for it except the bank account or whatever. And the quote tweet that went viral, somebody quote tweeted it and just said, "Fuck work." And it had 200,000 retweets. And I was like, that's really beautiful, because I think within all of us, again, there's that pure idea of freedom that we all kind of just want to be with our families or do a podcast or paint a flower or do whatever it is that we want to do. And, sort of the patriarchy and the system.
Creativity and creating art or creating expression of yourself, right? The output of being whole, as close as whole as we can ever get as humans, is anti-oppression.
Yeah.
Right? We demand to not be put into a box or have pieces taken away from us or told we can only be one thing. We demand to be whole. That is absolutely terrifying to people who only know how to be mutilated, only know how to inflict authority on others, because that's the only comfort that they know how the world works, and there's a lot of the Force in this speech. You believe that you are alone and separated because you can't see all of these others that are out there, right? It's kind of like the idea, you can't see the Force, but you can feel it. It exists, right? On some level. The dark side constantly needs to consume to exist. It constantly needs to control to exist, right? These are macro metaphors as well as micro metaphors for ourselves. That's big Star Wars, right? These things exist inside of us and also in the society. Oppression is the mask of fear, mask metaphors, right? Masks are meant to be stripped. Oppression is meant to be stripped. All of the oppressors are meant to learn that they are living in fear of something that they don't understand in themselves. Belief that you are separate from anybody else is false. You are not separate from others. You are in this, and everyone is a potential ally in this. And it's never too late to start. And even the smallest action is still action forward. Try. Which really, whoa, Nemec really taking it to Yoda in the second round here. Jeez.
Yeah.
Right?
That's good.
Right? Like, do or do not, there is no try. It doesn't account for how humans, this is genuinely true. When we go on psychological change journeys to transform ourselves, you will inevitably fail. And humans view continuous progress as trying rather than doing. And the idea that you didn't do it because you didn't succeed sometimes gets in the way. Instead, if you change your psychology to say, I'm constantly working on myself, I'm always trying, I'm always moving forward. If you fail, you're still trying. It's just a really interesting way to frame the same conversation which Yoda had, but with new words that more resonate with how we are actually as humans when we try to incorporate new ideas into our brains.
Yeah, sort of discovering new muscles we didn't know we had, or finding like artistic limitations. I think that it's nice to sort of try out something, that whole like learn an instrument or whatever, take up sewing or whatever habit. And, people will say, oh, how are you going to monetize this and make it into a, turn a capitalist profit? And, I think it's like that, it's nice to fail and it's nice to just feel good sometimes and, enjoy things for their own sake. And,
absolutely.
That's sort of a Yoda thing too, I guess, the whole, fail thing.
Yeah. I mean, Last Jedi Yoda is peak Yoda, in my opinion. He's so good. Right? Yeah. How do you learn without trying, right? How do you learn to go again, right? And the do or do not, it feels like, well, what if you can't do, right? Like Marva, right?
Sure.
She couldn't do, right? She was trying to be a rebel, but she couldn't do. But maybe that was just enough to inspire others.
Yeah.
Right? To take it a step forward. It's such a good conversation, a next generation conversation about Star Wars that's happening within the show itself. I appreciate it on so many levels.
Yeah, I love Marva in this episode. I think she's sort of the star of it.
Absolutely.
In so many ways.
Her presence is felt everywhere.
Yeah.
The town is being prepped for the funeral. Deirdre is reviewing all of the, security and like what the plan is with her people on the planet. I really loved how they're like, we're just going to be annoying and push back the funeral by a few hours. Like ridiculousness, like just to push them and make it uncomfortable. Like they didn't have to do that, but they did. Mm-hmm. They also said, we were originally going to limit it to 30 people, but the daughters of Ferrix pushed for 40. And they're like, and we've set it up with snipers. And she's like, containment, no snipers. Even here, there's like a consistent repeat of something that Deirdre is saying, which is she believes that people have value beyond death. And she says it twice right in a row. So she says, containment, no snipers. We want him alive, right? And
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
the alive portion is for information, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's some basis of understanding that life is valuable that's a seed in there. And I think that's really,
Sure.
really significant.
Mhm.
We flash back to the ISB headquarters, and we have Cloris, the driver, briefing Blevin, the supervisor, ISB supervisor, on Mon Mothma. So we get kind of a repeat of the conversation with a little bit of a tinge of his own opinion of it. And they sort of come to the conclusion that Mon Mothma wanted them to come to, that Para knows money and that she took the money out of the bank account or the money was taken from the bank account by him.
Yeah.
You know, sort of semi-illegal-ish activities, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But we find out that Anto Krieger was sacrificed because they kind of all watch it like a war room situation, right? No prisoners. And, you know, Blevin and the other guys that have been in the ISB war room before are all like, you know, oh, you can imagine who's not happy about this one, like the weak woman who just wants to save people to have conversations. And they're all like, yeah, death.
Yeah.
And she's like, I just wish I had been consulted. Like, I'm being reasonable here. And her supervisor's like, well, consider this the sacrifice that needed to be made to wipe the taste of Aldani from the Emperor's mouth.
Yeah, they're really obsessed about that whole Aldani thing.
Okay. Did this evoke anything for you? Like, it's obvious, it's obviously like a metaphor, right? Like, there's this metaphor, but like, again, this ties back to this consumption idea of the Empire that this was almost like a blood sacrifice to like,
sure,
make up for the loss of Aldani.
Yeah, like just to sort of keep the balance of fear or whatever, right? Like like Aldani made them nervous, so
it needed to be ghoulish and terrible so that the oppression could still continue, so the dark side could grow in a way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that she ends the conversation with, you can get nothing from a dead body.
Yeah.
That's what I've been saying as a Reylo for many freaking years.
Well, we always kind of expect some deaths at like the end of a Star Wars season or at like the climax. And we thought, especially in this show, that we were going to see like a lot of people die in the season finale. And it was like kind of a pleasant surprise, like how many of the important characters, you know, just went through sort of their own kind of hells. Yeah. But, you know, ultimately lived. So it ties in nicely with kind of the larger theme of the show, which is that character development and change and, you know, some real interesting arcs are a little more exciting than meet a character, they die, meet a different character, they die, etc.
And we get like multiple levels of setup. Like Luthen arrives on the planet. We get our snitch character scoping out the city. You know, we kind of get all these different like setup moments throughout prepping for the funeral. And it really reminded me of when you have like a Western and you have people setting up for like a showdown at the OK Corral. Like,
yeah, getting on the rooftop and stuff.
Yeah, like all of the different kind of like, oh, we got to go and talk to this person, or you shouldn't be back in town, you're going to get murdered. Like it really felt Western to me in genre, but yet kind of different. There was a different vibe to it, but underground. So people of the city are hiding Cassian in the underground tunnels. Brasso meets Cassian. They have this like amazing hug. And he's like in this panic, like, I didn't arrive in time. You know, she told me, you know, I tried to get her to come with me. She told me to go. And Brasso like immediately departs like the piece of the elixir that Marva had like carved out specifically for Cassian. And this is where we talked about a lot about the crone archetype last episode and how Marva was a crone and how I said she would absolutely be coming back to impart the elixir on Cassian and probably Bex. And I'm very right. So yay me.
Yeah.
But this specific piece of the elixir that needed to come to Cassian was the freedom to love. And this is very key in disrupting dominator cultures, oppressive cultures that focus on patriarchy or imperialism, capitalism, white supremacy. Like, this is all bell hooks theory, right? So Will to Change, read the book. It's amazing. But she says through Brasso, right, a trusted friend, tell him none of this is his fault. It was already burning. He was just the first spark of the fire, right? Tell him he knows everything he needs to know and feels everything he needs to feel. And when the day comes that you pull these things together, he will be an unstoppable force for good. I love him more than anything he could do wrong. What did you think?
Well, just this whole scene is like very memorable to me because I like this idea that, well, like I lost a grandparent earlier this week. And so you always have like oh, I wish I had like gone to, see him, one last time. You always have those like little regrets that, are kind of like, they don't amount to anything massive. But, so the first thing that Marva does when Cassian returns to Ferrix is to say through Brasso, hey, like, it's okay. You did nothing wrong. I knew you would say all that. I knew you would feel bad. It's okay. Like, you are a good person and you're going to do good things. And I don't know. That's just like a really beautiful kind of like little, you were busy, getting thrown in prison by the Empire. You were where you needed to be, like, spiritually. Like, it's okay. And I don't know. I loved all that stuff.
Many of you who have been on this journey with us know that my mother passed away while we were doing the coverage of this show. And one of the most startling things that people asked me after she passed was like, not in so many words, but like the idea that I would feel guilty. Like there would be something that I had left undone. And I absolutely left it all on the table. And my mom also made sure in the few words that she could say near the end that I did not feel sad or guilty that she was leaving me, and there's something so important about allowing yourself to be okay, right? You have to still go on and function and, you have to be okay with what happened.
Yeah.
Going back to feel and know, like, this is the heart and the mind. And when the heart and the mind come together, you're more powerful. You have a certainty of purpose and you're whole. You're whole as a person. You're not in conflict or doing something that your mind doesn't know is right versus what your heart feels is right. And these things need to be together. And immediately the conversation goes to Bix. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, yeah, that is interesting. We had kind of talked about her being sort of the daughter of Ferrix that would ultimately, take up the elixir for this community as Andor goes off to do his, sort of rebel fulcrum stuff. So yeah, that is interesting.
Well, and also
she's sort of the one at
what? Sorry, she's sort of what?
Oh, just sort of, we talked about how like the midpoint of the story is where people are at their lowest. And really that's Bix, I would say is, Deidre to, Deidre and maybe one or two other characters, but really Bix is kind of,
I would argue that Luthen is also at his lowest point.
Oh yeah. I think Luthen was the third one I had for that. Oh, Mothma too was actually the other one.
Yeah. There's a lot of characters that are now at their lowest points in the show. So Bix herself, let's talk about some symbolism in what's happening. She's literally a princess of Ferrix. She is the daughter of Ferrix, trapped in a tower, waiting for her hero to come and save her. She represents, i.e. the tower being the hotel that is shaped like a circle, which represents the self. She is his anima. The missing part of his feminine that he's been chasing all of those years trying to find his sister.
Yeah.
She is this feminine aspect of himself that he is turned around. feeling all this guilt about losing Marva, not realizing until Marva basically allows him to go and find and rescue Bix, and it's saving a piece of himself that he needs to save. And interestingly, there are 3 important bees that need to be saved out of Ferrix: Bix, Brasso, and Bee. Isn't that wild?
B2 emo? You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love him so much.
But there's 3 important bees. Isn't that interesting?
Interesting.
That are his like, these are his like lifelines of his mother. The 3 of them were there to help his mother.
Yeah.
Multiple times, right? Until Bix was captured. Mm-hmm. And even then, Marva was like, can I go and like break her out somehow? You know? Like, it's just so interesting. We have the arrival of Cyril and Sergeant Mosk.
Good old Sergeant Mosk.
This duo, man, their comedy in like, I have to ask you something because I didn't understand it other than maybe they were exchanging something, but they switched hats on their like transport in.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, I don't know if that's like a disguise thing. Yeah, I can't say I've ever done that really.
I didn't understand it. I want to hear what people think because I was like, this is interesting, but I don't get it.
You know, I had a lot of buddies in like high school and stuff, and we would wear hats like when we're out like golfing or whatever we were doing, and we would wear hats and we would wear like aviator sunglasses, and you know, it was rare that you would swap those things, but I guess that would be sort of an intimate act of friendship, I guess, if you were sort of switching your sunglasses. Yeah, I don't know. It is fun. I guess it's like a really half-assed disguise. Like if you were like really, really bad at like being a spy, you're like just putting on this other hat.
The only
sort of like the
thing I could think of was maybe there was like a message and they were trying to not seem like they were together, but then the rest of the time they're together in the town. So I don't know. I don't know. They look in the hat and then they put it on and then they switch with the other person.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So I don't know. It was weird. I was like, I don't know what this means, but it's cool. It was a cool moment. They spent time on it. They filmed this. Yeah. They did it purposefully. What did it mean? I don't know.
Yeah. And I think Mosk is without a hat at the end, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. I'm pretty sure.
Drinking on the street.
Yeah, just sort of sitting there drinking and kind of like defeated. It's like he's kind of done with his whole, his career.
This is too much.
Maybe.
Cassian goes to the rooftop to kind of view the festivities and what's going on. It's interesting that Luthen calls them festivities too when he has the conversation with Vel, right? I love how she's like, was getting worried, you know? Mm-hmm. They have a brief conversation about Deirdre. He knows exactly who she is. She's the only woman, I guess, in the ISB or something. He's excited. He's like, this is good. They're going to do all the work for us. They'll do the hunting and then we can just kill him. God, Luthen. And she lays out the plan for the funeral. Everybody seems to think that Cassian's there. It's a few hours. You'll hear the anvil. And then, like, not 2 heartbeats later, anvil starts to clang.
Yeah.
Which I love because this is exactly what Nemec was talking about. It's an act of defiance. They said, hey, your permit for this funeral is between X time and X time. And you can't have more time than that. And they're like, not 2 hours early when we originally wanted because that's special meaning to us.
Yeah.
It's civil disobedience.
Yeah.
Right? It's non-violent, but it is an absolute act of defiance against the Empire's really unreasonable rule.
Yeah. Yeah. Like they're only there just to be cops keeping an eye on the place. Like,
yeah, and they changed the time just to be annoying.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And
they got no purpose there.
Luthen is like caught off guard. Like he's super confused. He's like, what's going on? And they don't know what's going on. But we have the start of the funeral. I love this so much.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
Right.
The hammering is sort of like 2 notes at a time, right? Like clang, clang, and then like pause, clang, clang, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. We see the band warming up. We see people starting to gather. I love that we get more versions of in-universe instruments.
Yeah.
My husband was calling them out. He's like, you can't do that to an oboe. But like, they definitely look like either homemade or like pulled together into different ways, and they probably wouldn't function that way if you tried to play them that way. But I do love we get to see more in-universe instruments beyond cantina bands, because that's really like the only place that we've seen them, you know. The modal nodes, Krav Gava, you know, the bands of the universe.
Yeah.
The famous
and
bands.
Like, I could be wrong about this a little bit, but they sound like professional musicians playing instruments that are intentionally like way out of tune. Like,
a little bit,
like,
yeah.
they just sound like off, you know. It's like, it's not like they're playing badly, like they're playing exceptionally and the instruments are flawed. And I don't know, that's a very attractive idea. Lots of musicians talk about that. If you listen to like, you know, sort of rock stars talk about, you know, like the guy from Queen, like built his guitar out of like TV components, and it's like this piece of shit, you know, Frankenstein gizmo, but you know, he played it on all these like big Queen anthems and stuff like that. So I like the idea that they all kind of sound goofy, like
yeah, and they're all unique, they're all flawed, but yet they can still perform a meaningful serenade.
Yeah, like authentic individualism within a very like socialist collective society. It's a nice little thematic thing going on there.
I loved the key people in the band and the town leaders, including kind of the male town leaders of the different, like they're like Brassa's part of them, and also the Daughters of Ferrix. So you have the town band in orange and yellow, and then the community leaders and the Daughters of Ferrix in red. So literally, this leadership is coming together to produce to create I took a screenshot of it because I was obsessed with it. It looks like a flame.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I like that.
Right? So this is the start. This is a spark being led by music, performance, and the leadership of the community. Because you know how like in Flames, it's lighter in the middle and then darker on the outside? That's exactly how it looks with all of the leaders standing behind the band.
Nice. I gotta look at the image again, but I do remember all the sort of autumn colors. That's really cool.
We cut back and forth between the Empire in their stark black, like black outfits, the sort of people in their armor, and they absolutely look like police riot gear.
Oh yeah, they have like the big riot shields that are very the
larger
worldly
helmets that they've seen in like Solo, but they're all in black. Like I don't know that we've seen as much black in the Empire except for Death Troopers, as much as we've seen this stark contrast to really make them look like police officers in riot gear. And then we also get the occasional flash of white with regular stormtroopers, which again stand in for death and skeletons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's like it's kind of showing us again that creativity and art are an act of rebellion against oppression. We have Nurchi. I had it written down. The snitch, Nurchi, because it says in Nurchi grunts at one point. He's like, I know where he is, you know, and he's like, oh, tell me. He's like, double the reward. And because he had been working with him like the whole time, this Imperial. And he's like, pretend to arrest me. And so he does. He drags him off, and he kind of just gets to sit out in the hotel waiting for things to go down. And there's like a whole bunch of talk about like, oh, how do we approach him? And Deirdre's like, I need him alive. Don't make me say it again. Like, alive, alive. Remember, she's the only Imperial, literally the only one that's like, no deaths. We need people alive.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
I'm thinking back to the prison and how people are just expendable, you know, they're tools to be discarded. And so I like that she's the glitch in that system or whatever. Which again, we've kind of, you know, put our flag down in the Cyril Deidre redemption.
Oh, I have convinced people with this episode, I think. Like when they watch this, right? People are like, I wasn't on board, but Marie Claire, wow. Yeah. Right? Because there's so much more depth to those characters than we get from any of the other Imperials, right? They feel like they're like, I don't know, Mr. Anderson waiting to wake up and become Neo. Right? Like, there's something wrong with the world, but we don't know what it is, right? Even though they're kind of obeying the world rules the world and they're a tool in the machine. Remember to Nemec's, speech. You don't know where the rebels are going to come from. They might, right? Like it's calling back to that, right? The fact that she's just not willing to kill people, like outright, because they still have some sort of value, even if that value is just information, is just it's very telling.
Yeah, and it kind of started with Cyril too, and that was sort of when he kind of woke up to the fact that like, oh, human connection, like that's what I'm missing, and now he's kind of trying to drag her like in that direction of like, and in THX 1138, that was the whole thing, was like, don't fraternize, like you are cogs in a machine, don't go kissing, or whatever.
We have Brasso approaching with the stone in his hand, which is Marva, right? That's her stone. And I love how they're kind of like, they look sort of like puzzle pieces that fit into a wall. Like, that was cool. Like you're all part of the larger puzzle that made this community amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. But the horns and the theme continues on for Cassian. It turns more and more into Cassian's theme, or the Andor main theme. Bix hears it and kind of like awakens to like look out the window, like the first time maybe she's woken up from this miasma, which is again this larger metaphor, which is exactly what is repeated throughout the episode, that everyone is asleep, right? They need to be woken up. This is through the season too, right, Luthen, right? But his way of waking people up is through darkness, through allowing people to suffer and to fear the Empire, whereas this is a very different sort of waking. This is really key.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have, Deirdre chasing after Cassian, and Cyril's like, oh, Cassian, and then notices Deirdre. And in this like teenage boy way, she's here. It's her.
Yeah.
And, we have our sort of powder keg metaphorically set with everybody arriving to the main square, and the music speeds up. There's more woodwinds in the music. We have B marching forward with everybody else, or rolling forward with everybody else. Cassian gets to the tunnel, in the underground tunnel of the hotel. Everybody stops in the square, and they start to chant, "Stone and sky, stone and sky." What did you think of this scene?
Well, there's always that climb motif or repetition in the show. Like climb, that happens at the end of this episode. It happens in Rogue One earlier in the season. And so I think it's that idea of, where material mortal beings, but by building up these bricks and becoming part of the wall, we sort of climb on each other's spirits, and we sort of attain that spiritual transcendence through the rituals of funerals. And the whole thing I love about the Marva stuff is just that idea that through something like a funeral, or the hologram that we'll get to in a little bit, it's like you make you can be like an atheist and live a sort of irreligious life and still love the fact that we have these rituals, and it's very comforting and reassuring to have this idea that those who are gone are still with us in some way, and that we stand on their shoulders, or I think those are all like healthy, natural things to feel.
I love it.
So I don't know. That's the stone and sky thing to me is like a, stairway to heaven metaphor or something. I don't know. It's the best I got.
I also think it literally means Marva as the stone, and then her in the sky to deliver her own eulogy. Right. So I think that there's I think there's a bunch of things happening, right? The ritual itself is you have the stone. This is her. But then also her is this larger, grander message that she is able to deliver from beyond the grave, right? Which lives and is projected into the sky. So that's like
she's huge.
That is literally the direct what is happening, in the moment. But then there's also like a larger Star Warsian, thing happening, which relates back to psychology and spirituality in a large way. I've been talking throughout this whole episode how, the change happens internally, but it also happens externally, right? That you yourself might transform, but also you are transforming the society and the culture that you live in and the community that you live in by transforming internally. This is a big thing that George always talks about, how the micro is related to the macro. And more importantly, from a spiritual sense and from a psychological sense, there's this concept of as above is below, right? And so the idea that these things, Marva lives on as a brick in the wall, but she also lives on as the higher concepts that she represents to the world. And she is both, right? And it's such a healthy, amazing way to incorporate, yes, death happens, right? And this is something that I've actually seen Star Wars struggle quite a bit with, right? Death happens and they don't give the characters space to, have something out or to say something or to have meant something when they meant something to somebody, right? And this is to say, everything that you valued about the flesh is also important and lives on in the spirit, right? Yoda says it, you're not just this crude matter, you're also one with the Force, right? Yeah. And we get this in a non-Force user using these things. And essentially, this is the transformation of Marva as the crone archetype into the mage that lives on forever. We've seen this effectively happen with Force users multiple times. When they turn into Force ghosts, they become the mage to be able to pass on wisdom onto the next generation and carry on the elixir to help the community. And they become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Marva does that in effectively a similar way as Ben Kenobi on the Death Star or Luke as the spark of rebellion in The Last Jedi. She is as powerful as any of these because she is the spark of the rebellion on Ferrix, and people won't just stop there. They'll carry on the story of the things that she taught. She is passing on the elixir to the community and making the community better. Okay. Do you want me to read her words? Or do you have any thoughts before?
Sure.
This is exactly what I said would happen. Isn't that satisfying?
Yes.
Okay. B projects her into the sky, right? Sky and stone. My name is Marva Kararasi Andor. I'm honored to stand with you. I'm honored to be a daughter of Ferrix. Honored to be worthy of the stone, right? So that's, to me, the community. Strange as I feel, I can see it. Strange. I feel as if I can see it. I was 6 the first time I touched a funerary stone, heard the music, felt our history, holding my sister's hand as we walked all the way down to the fountain square, where you now stand. I have been more times than I can remember. Again, this is a massively important embrace of death as a part of the natural cycle of life. And she continues on. I always wanted to be lifted, always eager to be waiting to be inspired. I remember every time it happened, every time the dead lifted me with their truth. And now I am dead. Now I yearn to lift you. Not because I want to shine or be remembered. I want you to go on. I want Ferrix to continue. I fear for you. We've been sleeping. We've each had each other. And Ferrix, our work, our days, we've had each other and they've left us alone. We kept the trade lanes open and they left us alone. We took their money and ignored them. We kept their engines churning, and the moment that they pulled away, we forgot them because we had each other. We had Ferrix, but we were sleeping. We have been sleeping in turning away the truth I won't face. There is a wound in the center of the galaxy, or there is a wound that won't heal in the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching us like rust. Flashback to Clem's scene.
Yeah.
Clem's scene. Flashback to Clem's scene. Into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here. It's not visiting anymore. It wants to stay. The Empire is a disease that thrives in darkness. It's never more alive than when we sleep. It's easy for the dead to tell you to fight. Maybe it's true because fighting is useless. Perhaps it's too late. But I tell you this, if I could do it again, I'd wake up early. I'd be fighting these bastards from the start. Fight the Empire. And then the fight breaks out, obviously, because they're trying to stop her from finishing, right, the message.
Yeah.
I love that the rust comes back because ferrix being, ferrous or iron, rust is the cancer of iron. This is the cancer of the community. The Empire is the disease, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so good. It's everything we've been talking about this episode. The idea of the community, the sleeping, the wakefulness, the, idea that we need to wake up and care about this because the community is what is important. And she's not saying it, but she's saying it is, you will be dead, right? It's going to kill you. This will kill you. The disease will kill you.
Yeah. Like sort of apathy, basically, like where Cassian was for a lot of his early journey is like that whole keep your head down mentality, behave and don't get perceived and just kind of, and people would love to buy into that myth that like, the darkness won't get to them because they're, doing all the right things that the oppressors tell them to do. And, it's just not true. So,
yeah.
I love that she seems to know exactly how this would all play out. And, perhaps like this is like a regular thing where, these people on this planet record these messages for the funeral and traditionally give their own eulogies if they're able to, which I love. But, she crescendos, she gets to the, fight the bastards, fight the Empire. Like she knows exactly what she's doing.
Yeah.
And it's so cool.
And the anvil clangs start again and the fight breaks out and Brasso uses the stone of Marva to smack somebody in the face.
Yeah. So good.
So good. And Cassian's on his way to rescue Bix from the tower, or climbing those stairs, right?
Yeah.
And he arrives and it's to that line that you talked about earlier on in the episode. I dreamt you came back, that you climbed over the wall. Marva's here. Wasn't she great? Yeah. So good.
So great. Yeah, it's very like damsel in distress kind of thing, like you were saying, but also, it's like she's kind of outside of the normal perception of time in this episode in so many ways. Like she speaks in like odd tenses sometimes when she's or she'll talk about Cassian like he's not standing right in front of her, or she'll talk about Marva like she is when she I don't know. There's something cool going on there.
Yeah.
Obviously she had to suffer for it, but
she's sort of stuck in the underworld, right? And I think she will be for a little while, even though she's been rescued, right? Because heroines can't be rescued from without; they have to be rescued from within, and it has to be themselves that rescues themselves. It's a thing psychologically, and it will be interesting to see how her story plays out in season 2. It comes to a kind of a large start of the fight is just one thing, and they start to close in, and the son of the guy who was killed throws his bomb, and that sort of sets off the rest of this battle, right? It's very much ends up being a battle. It blows up more things. There's more chaos, right? Cinta follows the ISB guy down the alleyway and knifes him.
Brutal.
B, who is tossed aside by one of the commanders, ends up being saved. which is like you're cheering for him to be dragged out of that fight.
Yes.
Bix and Cassian are slowly limping their way out of the craziness. And we have the, reuniting of the three Bs. We have, B and Bix and Brasso all together at the ship. And, we have this amazing, chaotic, very stressful moment of Deirdre being knocked down and almost being like torn apart by angry citizens. And Cyril finds the gun and like uses it to like kind of convince people she's going to be destroyed. And so, but thus saves her in the dark.
Yeah.
What did you think of this scene?
Well, two images I really loved are Vel running into the smoke. That was like a beautiful shot that I just loved so much. And I loved the tower, the drummer guy in the tower.
Yeah. Him kicking the stormtrooper off the tower and you see him fall.
Yeah. Oh, man, that was so good. And then, I don't know, just the chaos of Deidre sort of scrambling. She's sort of lost, and all her kind of Deidre qualities are stripped away, and she's sort of like Mufasa about ready to be trampled by the stampede in The Lion King. And
I like how her white jacket just instantly becomes brown by the dirt.
Sure.
Right? Like instantly that shine is gone. She's covered in dirt.
And she's just so the way that Cyril was shattered in the last sort of battle on Ferrix at the beginning of the series, like she is shattered by this battle in the same sort of way. And Cyril, by contrast, is really like confident, and he knows what he's done is like, in his way, he's sort of played the hero here, and he's very sort of confident. I don't want to say like the guy.
How?
Yeah.
Cyril responds, "You were in trouble."
Yeah.
I should say thank you. You don't have to. Okay.
I'm sure a lot of people make it their job to hate this guy in this show, and that's fine. But I think I hated him at first for a lot of reasons too. But he's very kind of likable in this episode. Just the way he kind of...
I don't see how redemption is not coming for both of them.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I think so.
I don't see how they could be like, and now we're going to make them completely evil and die.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that like jarred like Finn out of his whole stormtrooper life was like, the refusal to kill just for sort of senseless orders, just sort of the typical wartime stuff. And it was like, no, I'm not going to kill, so I'm going to run. And I mean, that's kind of what Deidre has been doing. And, just the fact that, Finn found connections with like Rey and Poe, like, we're seeing that happen with Deidre and Cyril. It's the same kind of thing.
I do think that she's going to try to return to the ISB, and
sure. Yeah.
There's going to be a dissonance in how she's treated based on how much loyalty that she's given. So it'll be very much like a mirror of the Cyril. Like, I was loyal. I did the right thing. I did all these things. But like, she's going to be suffering because of what has happened.
Yeah, this is like her disgrace. Yeah.
Yeah. And Cyril is going to continue to support and help her. I personally think that there's going to be a way back for both of them, because they're not the system, and they're proving that, right? The story is proving that they are unique. They're exactly what Nemec said, Yeah.
And we saw, what's that about Nemec? Sorry.
Oh, there's exactly what Nemec said, is that like your allies, your battalions could be anywhere.
Oh, right.
Because the system is unnatural, and seeing how just the regular population, these normal people, very normal people, are just utterly done with the Empire, right?
Yeah.
There's something in that. I don't know if she'll turn right away, Deirdre, but Cyril will go wherever Deirdre goes, which I think I said before too.
Yeah. I like too that like we have this example with like Lonnie, I think his name was, and Luthen, where it's like he has no choice but to be a spy for the rebellion, or he'll like get killed basically. Whereas here we have people like Cassian and Bix and Marva, especially, like sort of just deciding to be rebels, like sort of on their own essentially. And So I like the idea that maybe Deidre, would at some point decide to be like a rebel spy within the Empire without Luthen having a gun to her head,
Yeah.
It's kind of an attractive idea.
It is. It sort of reminds me of Callus in a way,
Yeah.
And we might get more of that Callus being from Rebels. Yeah. Who was also a security person, internal security person. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have this amazing shot of Luthen staring at the destruction of the city, and he's like sort of lost. Like Luthen at the start of the season talked about how he doesn't get his hands dirty anymore, and it feels like he's getting rusty because of it. And it's like he's been so disconnected from the truth of the rebellion, that Nemec talks about, and he's just so far from it into, making it a game. Right. I think he even calls something like a game, and he's almost playing like, oh, we can use the Empire. We don't even have to get our hands dirty. We don't have to do any work. Like he's almost too disconnected from the people and what the people will do in any given situation. And he's almost like lost. It's really an interesting moment that we just focus on him and experience it and live with him, sort of realizing that for all of his accounting and all of his strategizing, there's something so raw about people just deciding to no longer comply.
Yeah.
No longer consent to the Empire.
Yeah. And it, like at the end, without jumping around too much, like, he says, like, what game is this? Because, in his mind, everybody is sort of a chess piece to be played and understood and stuff. But like, Cassian's like, well, actually, I'm just being my authentic self and I'm just telling you the truth and being honest. And Luthen's like, what's your angle here? That's trust is, a sign of, healthy outlook and relationships,
It is. Yeah. And Luthen doesn't have that, right?
No, he's kind of messed up right now.
We have Pegla sending off the shipload of people with Bix and Brasso and Willimon. It's like Willimon. Right? Like Bo Willimon. It's almost like that.
Oh, right. Yeah, the writer. Sure.
The kid's name. And
love it.
Jez, I think. And of course B is also on there. And so like the shipload of people are leaving the planet. And it's almost like the heart of Ferrix is living on in the ship. And they're going to the Ganji moon, which is cool. I don't know anything about that place. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I was like, is that the place where Skeen like betrayed them? I don't think it is, though. I was just kind of like, it doesn't ring a bell. But
and we have a sort of capper scene for the whole Mon Mothma, Lita, Perrin moments, right? With
sort of wordless meetup,
introduction to the gangster's son and the mom, who's very tall. Yeah. I was very impressed with this tall woman. And you were like, oh, she did it. And I didn't want it to happen, but I knew she was going to do it.
Yeah, we pretty much called it that the kid would probably be like, she would be taken by him being, a handsome kid and charming or whatever. And, this is kind of the happiest we've seen Lita look or Lita. Yeah. This is sort of the happiest we've seen her in the show. So, it's going to be interesting as those families become entangled, Mon Mothma, who's squeaky clean, and this guy who's, like a well-dressed Jabba the Hutt.
And Luthen end scene, of course, we just talked about it a little bit, but he's in full stealth mode to get out of here. But I really wanted to talk about Andor's response in this, you kill me or you take me in. And really, this is like, this is the upper out kind of, one way out chant in a new way. He's taking it forward and he's saying, really, like, I can't live any other way than by fighting the Empire.
Yeah. He's showing that he's finally been won over to be like committed to the cause in the way that Luthen wanted, but it's also like a thing
his
where
own way.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be like looking over his shoulder and wondering when somebody's going to shoot him in the back, within, his own, the rebels. he wants to be, not a mercenary anymore. So he's kind of where he always needed to go from the beginning.
And of course, if you stayed to the end of the credits, you get to see this glorious shot of seeing the sort of hex or the, star machine pieces, components that the prisoners were making on Narkina 5 being put together by droids in space in a sort of an array. And you zoom back from this small micro section of these things being used to construct the weapon of the Death Star, the main laser of the Death Star.
Yeah, it's like the sort of dish shape, yeah.
Yeah, the thing that eventually causes Cassian's death is the thing that he was helping to construct, which, has a lot of poetry about it, of course. One of the other things that I like is that the shot moves back further and shows sort of the Cassian symbol, in construction with the Death Star laser being above it.
Yeah, it's almost like the opening titles of the show too. When it says Andor, it's got that like 2001: A Space Odyssey orb, and now we kind of know what that is. Yeah, totally. Yeah,
it's that, right? Like it's like the tools for oppression and rebellion are the same.
Yeah,
in a way.
Yeah.
The people can be used either way.
Yeah, and it's like, like I was saying about you can't just keep your head down and wait for good behavior to save you. Like, you are, if you're helping the oppressors, like, you're feeding the beast that is eventually going to just eat you one way or another. And, Luthen and Andor kind of said that earlier in the season, right? Like, this thing, the Empire is going to kill you one way or the other. Like, don't you want to hurt the bastards first? That kind of thing, which I love.
Exactly. And we have reached the end of Andor season 1, and we are better for it.
Yes.
Any final thoughts, Alex Kane, on this?
Just that, this is like a really special story. It was very sort of complete as the season felt like its own contained thing, and people are really responding to it in special ways. And I hope that Lucasfilm takes note of the way people value this as like a work of art that is meaningful and bold and embraces that kind of pushing of the envelope and kind of telling capital T truth and we spent a lot of time talking about the show and loving every minute of it. It's just I don't know, it's a good feeling to have loved something like Obi-Wan, which is very sort of familiar and safe, and then see the storytelling move into like, okay, we're gonna ditch the lightsabers and Darth Vader and try something very human, almost mundane. I've heard very few people say they dislike the show, but the ones who have called it like boring, and it's like, please, more boring stuff. Give me all the boring stuff. Like, that's where you get characters and symbolism and this like gorgeously written dialogue that the show, it just like sings, it just hums with the dialogue. It shows really what the Disney Plus format is capable of that, maybe a movie trilogy wouldn't quite do. And
absolutely. It gives more time for the story to breathe. And we'll be back 2024 to talk about the rest of this, because how can we not, given the delicious, delicious Star Wars meal that we just consumed?
It's so good.
It is. Just letting everybody know that I will be covering Willow starting next week. Please come back for the fun romp and adventure. I'll be covering that with Missy. Alex Kane will be back at some point, I'm sure.
Sometime for something. Yeah, maybe there's a Mandalorian on the way or something. We'll find something, I'm sure.
I know Mandalorian season 3 is going to be epic with Rick Famuyiwa coming back as
love him
as the main showrunner, and he writes the most deeply psychological episodes and remembers to use people's names. So I'm really
he's
excited
phenomenal.
for that. Yeah.
He's one of my favorites for sure.
It'll be great. And then, of course, I think Bad Batch is coming out pretty soon. Lots and lots of Star Wars on its way.
Yeah, I've seen sort of lists going around of all the stuff that's like this year and all the stuff that's next year. And it's a lot.
There's a lot of Star Wars coming.
It's exciting.
It is. It's great. So yeah, come back for Willow starting next week. I'm covering it. And as well, Alex Kane, where can people find you if they're looking for you before we record our next episode together sometime in the future?
I have a link tree that's like Alex J. Kane, and I'm on like all the nascent social media platforms, that trying out, Tumblr and, what's it called? Hive Social and all those things. And yeah.
I'll link to your link tree in the liner notes.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you again, Alex, for joining us. And thank you, our dear listeners who have been so kind to us and giving us great comments and feedbacks and cheering us on. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is provided by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Cheryl, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, How Rude, Anna Perez, Neil, Joe Allen D, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, Scott C, and Susan. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. Check out our other channel on YouTube, What the Fiction. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, and our website, whattheforce.ca. We also have a Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.